All right, well, let's get started so that way we can make this kind of quick. I don't think it's going to take very long. Um, so let's see if I can share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? You see these two PDFs? Cool. Okay, so I'm a visual learner, and so if you can kind of follow along with what I'm going to talk about, it might just be kind of easy so you can kind of see what we're looking at. All right, so the first thing is kind of logistical, and I might be preaching to the choir here because everyone's here, but um, I try to be as clear as I can when I'm typing out these emails. I know you get just a ton of emails. I mean, I get a million emails, and so I really try to keep the information that I'm sending you concise, and I try to make sure that it's really clear. And so I've just been getting some kind of questions that make me think that we're not truly reading the emails. Always feel free to ask a question. If you're in doubt, I mean, ask me the question. Like, I really don't mind. But I've just had a couple emails lately that I'm just thinking, like, I literally just said that. So just make sure you're reading the emails. And if you do have any questions, obviously feel free to ask. But just, most of you are undergrads probably. So just get in the habit of making sure you're reading your emails carefully and that you're not just glancing. Okay, so the next thing logistically is that looking at the Google form, everyone's just kind of at a different level. And so I don't really want to give too much like kind of blanket information after this meeting just because I feel like it's not doing everybody justice because everyone's in kind of a different place. I've got some people who've already sent me some stuff and I've been really impressed at just the things that you're doing. And then I've got some people that had mentioned that they really have not done any arranging at all. And so I want to be able to kind of give everybody some personalized comments and feedback. And so after this meeting, which is going to just kind of give you some other basic things, I'm going to do our meetings a little bit more individual. So that way I can kind of give you some individual feedback. Does that make sense? That way you guys are getting something out of this and it's not just kind of like, either that's over my head or this is not challenging enough or not giving me what I need. So what I'm going to try to do is Monday morning, I get up pretty early. So Monday morning, I'm going to send out one of those doodle links with the times that I have available. And just by that night, just fill out what spot you want. We'll just keep them at kind of 30-minute sessions. It may be a little shorter if they have to go a few minutes over. I'm okay with that. But then fill that out by Monday night and then put that in your calendar and we'll plan on that being our meeting time. And if something comes up on either of our ends, like if I end up having to have a meeting or something, I'll let you know. And then obviously if something comes up on your schedule and you need to change it, just let me know. So that's kind of what we're going to look at for our meetings. And that way, with these projects, you may need more than a week to be working on some of this stuff. And I'm okay with that because, some of this stuff is creative and it's hard to be creative on demand unless it's your job to be creative on demand. I totally get where sometimes you kind of have to wait until inspiration hits you. So I don't want you to think that this has to be every single week, but if you want to check in and you want me to look at something, I want to make that available to you. Is that making sense what I'm saying? My email pops up randomly. All right, so then let's get into some more of actual arranging and some music writing stuff. So hopefully you've got this first set of objectives done. You picked your route. I saw that on there. You've hopefully gotten the program and you've kind of looked around a little bit in whatever you're doing, especially if it's new. I'm like a YouTube-aholic. I spend so much time on YouTube. I recently enabled on my phone screen time just out of curiosity and like, man, I spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos, mostly informational, but still, YouTube is a great resource. So YouTube is great for some of these programs if you get confused about something. I know a little bit about some of them and might be able to help you, but YouTube is great. And the other thing, again, setting up your workspace. Like I know a lot of us working from home, like I've been able to get my kind of home office set up. And so, I'm able to sit down and really feel like I can kind of get in the zone. That's a really important thing is getting in the zone when you're working on something. Hopefully you picked your song, you've started making mental decisions and things like that. So let's kind of take it to the next step. So for some of you, I need to go ahead and open Sibelius and Logic. So for some of you, um, doing the score, the traditional route, if you already are familiar with this, then that's fine. Just kind of you can take it with a grain of salt. But if this is your first time, I just kind of want to walk you through a little bit of some things to think about when you're setting up your score. The first thing to be thinking about is don't get too like locked in on like some of the nitpicky stuff about the options that you have in the beginning, because you can always go back and change them. One of the big things I found for myself is that when I'm ready to write and I'm kind of getting myself in the zone, I try to limit all the extra things like we were talking about before. The computer is your access to music. And so if you're fumbling around with the program or the computer, or even worse, technical difficulties, that's always so frustrating when you're like in the mood to write, and yet something comes up and you just can't do it, or whatever the case is. That always just makes me so frustrated. So don't worry too much about this, but I'm going to go take you through Sibelius, but it's going to be kind of the same with a lot of this stuff. You're going to start out, and you're going to have to pick some of these things. Is everyone seeing what I'm looking at, Sibelius? Okay. So again, like don't worry too much about like what your score size is or whatever. But instruments is kind of an important thing. I'm just going to pick common instruments. So if you're going to do any sort of wind score, obviously think about your parts. And a lot of times, even if I'm going to write something really big, like I've done a lot of tuba ensemble arrangements, and I've done, 6 parts each. And sometimes, especially in the beginning, looking at 12 staves are just kind of like, it can be tough. And so in the beginning, it's okay to start out with simplicity, like just put a couple. So like even if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to do this for a full marching band, maybe don't put 3 clarinet parts and 3 trumpet parts and 3 trombone parts and like fill up your score. Maybe keep it kind of simple and just give yourself like flute, clarinet, alto, and just kind of like fill it in like that. So once, I'm not going to go through and do everything, but once you kind of go through and you pick out the instruments that you want, bass clarinet is usually what I do, trumpet, 2 trumpets, a horn, trombone, UF, tuba. Put your horn below your trumpets in your score. Put your horn below trumpets in your score if you have band. And then you can always maybe deal with percussion later, depending on what I'm doing, depending on what my percussion is. So get your instruments in there. Usually you're going to have to pick your time signature. Again, sometimes like if you haven't already figured out what your time signature is, then just pick 4/4, pick something simple. Again, this is the part, like quickly get through this part so you can get into it. I always start with some sort of like whatever my tempo is going to be. You may not know what the key is yet, and so why don't you maybe just pick something like no key signature, C major, some arbitrary title. I mean, if you want to go through and put, the thing in there. My old band director always told me under the copyright to put copyright, your name, the date, and then put all rights reserved. It's probably dumb and unnecessary, but I think it kind of looks cool in the score, so for some reason I always do it. And then you get yourself into the program. If you're doing a DAW bass, just kind of give a second. I'm going to look at that in just a minute. But here you go. You've got your score here. I'm weird, and I always change the name of my stuff quickly, but I'm not going to go over it. And most of you, there might be this thing called panorama view, and basically that just takes, instead of looking at it like this, where you've got all of these pages and things, it just takes it and kind of puts it into like one big blob of music, and that's usually like my workspace. I like to write like this. Let's see if I can, you're gonna have to see me go through all my documents here. Documents, music. I'm gonna pull up an example score. Sibelius, everything else. Actually, let me I'll pull up a marching band show. Let's do Gladiator. Sibelius files. Scene 1. All right, let's see what we got here. Okay, so when I'm looking at stuff, I'm looking at it like I want to see it all in one big screen. I don't want to worry about pages and things like that. And so when you're writing, try to get it in a big blob like this. And let's see if I can go back and show you some versions. Let me move this, whatever. Let's see. View. Where are versions? Here we go, versions, previous version. How do I just see? Just gonna try to go back to like version 1. How do I just edit versions? Maybe that's it. Yeah, here we go. Let's go back to the beginning here. This was 16. Let's go back here. View. Okay, so this was, you just saw that madness that was on the screen. There was a bunch of stuff, but version 1, I mean, was like really simple. Like my percussion parts are simple. I just got some band parts here that were really simple. So, you know, it's okay to keep things really simple in the beginning, just like getting stuff out there. All right, before I go deep into doing that, I want to take one more look at Logic here for a second. So with Logic or any other whatever you're going to have, like DAW-based program, you're not going to have staves. You know, you're going to have tracks that you're going to create. And I would suggest go through and just like, let's see, where's the option? Software instrument. Number of tracks, I don't know. Sometimes I just put like 10. And I just wanted to basically give me a whole bunch. And see, this is what I would use if I didn't have a MIDI keyboard, which I have done before. I just have a whole bunch, and I go through the library and I pick something. I mean, if you know what you're going to do and you kind of have an idea, then like you can kind of start there. But don't get fed up on like the sounds. Like just pick something that works and then just kind of start working with it. And again, like get into it. And then like once you start kind of getting some things in here, then you can start being like, you know, this sound isn't really what I'm looking for, and you can start doing that. But again, getting things out there, that's what you kind of need to start with. It's just like getting your program set up and all those sort of things. So getting it set up so that when you come back and you're like in the mood to arrange, everything's ready to go. You've got the program there. You don't have any distractions of, oh, I have to get this done. It's like, no, let's just get to writing. Remember we talked about last time how you can't, what is the term? Refine. You can't refine something that doesn't exist, right? So the first step is to just get content on the page. So that's kind of like the first objective, is to just get everything set up so when, you know, the mood is right, you're ready to go. All right, the next thing is, my sister says this all the time and I really like it. I'm sure she got it from somewhere, but failing to plan is planning to fail. Set up sometimes, I don't know if you have a calendar or not. I'm gonna flash it on the screen real quick and I'll show you just kind of how like ridiculous my calendar is. If you don't have some sort of organizational method, like that you can kind of keep yourself organized in some way, like do that for sure. Have some way that you're keeping yourself organized. If you know you're an undergrad, you're especially realizing now like you've got a lot to keep up with, have some organizational way that you do it. My assistant last year at the school that I taught, it drove me insane how he just like never wrote anything down. And it would be like, hey, did you remember to do this? And it was like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. And it was like, dude, you're supposed to be a professional here. Like, be organized, write things down, have a calendar. So in some way, and you don't necessarily have to be, you know, strictly sticking to it, like, oh, I put myself down for an hour, so I have to write a full hour. But it's just kind of like getting in the mindset of plan some time that you're like, okay, I'm going to set things aside. I'm going to work on this. The next thing is, if I start going too fast or I break up, tell me, because I'm trying to keep this meeting kind of short. The next thing is making some mental decisions. This is probably the most important thing that you're going to do, because what you're doing this for really dictates so much of, you know, everything about your arrangement or your composition or whatever you're going to do. You know, if I'm doing this for a pep band, then obviously I kind of know my instrumentation, right? It's going to be winds, band. I'm going to know my length, right? If it's a college pep band, then it's going to be around 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. If it's a high school pep band, maybe 30 seconds. I'm also, if it's for high school, then I got to make sure I keep things within a certain range or whatever. If it's for college, if it's for professionals, If this is just an arrangement for the fun of it, then you just pick whatever instrumentation that you want. You can make it however long that you want, and if you're not ever having anyone play it, then you can make it as hard as you want. So that kind of like in your mind, just make some mental decisions like, what is this for? You know, if it's like maybe one day the marching band will play this, then kind of be thinking like, okay, I'm not going to have my trumpets playing high D's and E's or something crazy like that. You know, keep it in a certain range or whatever it is. So just kind of like make those mental decisions, and that's stuff that you can do when you're driving, right? You don't have to be sitting at a computer to make some of these mental decisions. All right, so now this is in getting into more like the actually doing something. I'm calling it week 2, but really at this point it's going to be a little bit more on your own. I will check in with you if I haven't heard from you for a while, but this is just kind of like the next step, is actually starting to write some things out. Usually, if I'm doing a pop song, I like to start with whatever is going to be the easiest, and sometimes that's the bass, sometimes it's the melody. If the melody is really syncopated, or maybe I don't like it that much as far as like, I know in my mind I'm going to want to change it, or I've got something in my head that's a little different. A lot of times I'll start with the bass, because usually that's where you start to see your chords and things like that. And so either one, if you've got the melody in your head and you want to go ahead and start with the melody, you just got to do what we call woodshedding, which is just sitting down, listen to the song. You know, hopefully you've kind of got it in your head and you're kind of putting that into the program, figuring out what the rhythms are. If you're doing a DAW bass, then it's more just being able to play it, so that when you hit the record button, you can input it in the way that you want to hear it, right? Because with a DAW-based, it really comes down to you. You're kind of playing an instrument that's being recorded, so you just want to be able to play it so that you're hearing it the way you want to. Usually I start, like I said, with the easiest, most obvious part to input, because again, I just kind of want to get something in there. And then I start with like whatever's the next most obvious thing, which if I started with the bass, it'd be like some treble part, and if I started with treble, then it'd be some bass part. I know some of you maybe are not hardcore music theorists or anything, but usually this is the part where I start to see some patterns and I start to see some chords. And if you know anything about chords and chord progressions, this is where I start to kind of, in my mind, be like, oh, okay, this is what it is. The bass is always doing this. There's a 5 chord here, and I start just kind of seeing like, what's the song doing? I'm breaking it down in my head just a little bit. But even if you're not seeing chords, just noticing patterns, because we're going to talk about that in just a second, how we're going to deal with those patterns. But starting to notice patterns is really important. And it's okay to keep things really thin. Like, you don't have to start filling everything out all at once. I usually kind of work in layers, where once I get the first section or so bare bones, I kind of start moving on to the next section, and I get it bare bones. And a lot of times when I start getting tired of that section, I go back and I fill in the first section, and then I might go to the third section and start working on it, and it'll be bare bones, and then I'll go back and kind of fill in the second one just a little bit. And so I kind of work in layers and stages. And so again, it's okay if it's thin. You're just trying to get something out there. The next thing is more mental decisions. So once you kind of start getting things in the program and you start kind of getting an idea of what it's going to sound like, and things like that, that's where you have to start kind of thinking about, all right, what is the form of this going to be? If I'm arranging a pep band chart, you know, for the marching band, then that's where I start thinking, okay, what needs to come next? Do I need to go back into some sort of verse? Should I play the chorus twice? Maybe I'm going to do the bridge or something. It's just kind of, you need to start thinking about like, what's it overall going to look like? And that's going to affect your transitions from section to section. And the ending is always the hardest part for me. I hate writing the endings because I'm like, especially if I think something's really cool, I'm like, dang it, then the ending has got to be really cool. And I put all this pressure on myself to write some kind of cool ending. And so, but all that stuff kind of, again, goes back to this part. And again, like slowly start filling in parts. A lot of times if you're doing a pep band song, or a pep chart or something, there'll be a lot of doubling. If you're doing like a low brass score, there probably won't be a lot of doubling. If you've only got 4 or 5 parts, you know, you're not going to do much doubling. But bigger scores will have doubling. And then most things will need percussion. A lot of people don't, you know, are not percussionists, and so they're not writing percussion parts. If you don't want to do any sort of percussion, like that's totally fine. Don't feel like you have to do percussion. If you're using DAW, then it's easy to kind of do percussion because you can either do some sort of loop, or you're able to kind of get some sort of track and play with the sounds pretty easily. But with people that are doing traditional bass, you have to input things, and that can be kind of challenging. So don't worry about that too much. And if you haven't noticed already, I'm kind of weird and particular about stuff, and so I always put a little bit of time into the formatting of my score, just because ultimately, if you're doing this for someone to read, the easier it is for them to read, the better they are going to perform it. And so I really try to make sure that from a musician's perspective that it looks really clear and clean. So anyway, that's kind of like the gist of what I want you to start thinking about for the next week or two. And whenever you've got some stuff, feel free to send it to me, and I'll give it a listen when I can and give you some feedback. If you're going to do the score based, send me the score and what's called transposed pitch. And whatever program that you have, there should be some sort of button that has transposing score or non-transposing. If you see all these instruments right here, this is concert pitch. So we're in the key of C, so that means that every single instrument is concert pitched. I'm seeing the key of C. Even in horns, if I type in a C, I'm hearing a C. But in transposing, every instrument, if some of you know, reads different keys, and so it's giving you the actually transposed. When I'm looking at scores, I like to see transposed. When I'm writing, I usually write in transposed. But when I'm reading it, I like to see transposed scores. So if you would, when you send me that, send it to me transposed. And then DAW people, along with the audio, I'd kind of like to see your setup. Like, send me a screenshot of what it looks like on your home screen, just so I can kind of see, like, you know, what instruments do you have? You know, how have you been inputting things? You know, do you have any effects on some stuff? I don't know, just kind of give me an idea of what you're working with. So yeah, that really quick rambling lasted about 22 minutes. We're getting close to our 30-minute mark. Do you guys have questions about anything that I just said, or any kind of upcoming anything? What you got?
Oh yeah, I just said I sent you a score, but I decided to go with a different instrumentation. So could you just ignore what the first thing I sent you?
I will. Yeah. Anything, anything, anything?
So we don't have to create the whole song right now. We can just make few sections.
Yeah, absolutely. Do not feel like you have to do everything all at once, right? Like I would tell my kids all the time, how do you eat an elephant? I'm sure some of you have heard that, one bite at a time. And so don't feel like you've got to do everything all at once. That's why my suggestion for week 2 here is write out the bare bones for one or two sections. Like, you know, obviously you can take the ball and run with it as much as you want, but my suggestion, especially if you're new, is to just kind of start out with trying to get a few sections in there so you have something to work with. And for some of you, getting used to the program is going to be difficult. And so this will kind of help you start to be able to navigate the program and stuff like that.
Uh, is there like maybe a time limit, like for how long a song should be? You know?
That kind of goes back to, you know, what are you doing this for? If I was doing this, if I was writing a symphony, right? You know, Mahler's symphonies were like an hour and a half. You know, so it's like that's an extreme example. And when I would write pep band charts for my school, I would write things, you know, like 30 seconds. I don't even know if I can. Where's my North Point folder? Here it is. Pep band arrangements. I don't know which one to pick here. As we started getting better, I started to make things a little bit, I don't know, Africa. It's like this one was a little bit longer one, but I made it so that there was a repeat, so I think it was like a minute. But like I knew that at our games, when they took a third quarter break, that it would be about a minute. And so, you know, I wrote this out. Gotta love some Africa. So I wrote this one out to be about a minute. Let's see, what is it at right here? Yeah, 52 seconds right here, and we probably played this at 92. So that was about a minute. And then I had an optional repeat. Like if it was halftime and you know, we had the time, I'd say take the repeat. And we'd play it one more time. And so it really just kind of comes down to, in your mind, make a mental decision about what's this for and how long do you want to make it. It's a good question. What else you got? All right, so the last thing I guess I'll leave you with is just some other factors that I was thinking about for kind of getting in the zone. That's like a really important thing. And for most of you, you probably are already aware of this, but when you're studying or when you're doing anything important, um, getting in the zone is like an integral part of like making mental connections and things. And so for me, just some other things that are really important. Getting in the zone, like limit your distractions, have your workspace set up. We already kind of talked about finding a song you really like. Sing the song a lot, like just in your head. Like that's the most important thing. Is like whatever's in your head is going to come out in the program. And so if you don't have anything in your brain, then like nothing's going to come out. And so if the song's not playing and you can't hear parts, then you need to listen to it some more. And while you're listening to it, try to hear a part you've never heard before. That's like one of my favorite musical challenges is to listen to a song and to sit there and like hear a part that I've never heard by just basically trying to just like cycle through things. And sometimes that's where you can find some really cool stuff. I think I put it in here. Um, Maybe I didn't. Creating like little Easter egg moments. A lot of times in songs, they like will put these little background things that are really cool. And so a lot of times people don't hear them. And like I hear other people's arrangements, I'm like, man, you missed out. Like there's this cool part you could have added in there. And so it's like try to listen for some of those things that'll kind of make your arrangement unique or your composition unique. Knowing the program, be creative. Like I was saying, if you want to change something, this is your arrangement. Make it your own. This is kind of specific information, but know your ensemble. If you were writing this for someone specific, kind of the more you know the group, the better you can write for them. And then these last two things would be some good things to leave on because we may not have a big Zoom meeting anytime soon. Create moments, have good flow, rise and fall, set up expectations, then either follow or break them. Music's all about creating moments. If you think about some of the reasons why you all love music, I'm sure it was some sort of moment that you experienced with music that you were like, damn, that was really cool. For me, it started with drum corps. Like that was some of the moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy awesome. And so like it just kind of like these moments that got created. And so when you write music, you got to think like people are listening to this. What kind of moment can you create that someone's going to think, wow, this is really cool, whether it be like something big or something really soft and beautiful that's touching, like just kind of be thinking about creating a moment. This is like more advanced stuff, like once you get it, but just stuff to kind of be thinking about. And then the last thing is I love to set up an expectation, like a rhythm or a feel or a groove, and then I love to break that expectation. I don't know if you've ever heard of a band called Tool, Tool, but they're like a progressive metal group. And man, I love them because they'll set up this really cool groove or this expectation, and then out of nowhere, they'll just break that expectation. And it just kind of, I don't know, I find it really intriguing. So you can either set up an expectation that you can follow so your listener has something to kind of expect, or if you like to be a little bit out there, like set up an expectation and then find creative ways to break that expectation just to make the music a little bit more interesting. All right, 29 minutes, 22 seconds. That's all I got. You have any more questions? All right, then I'm going to send out a doodle link this upcoming Monday morning and then sign up for a time. And I'm going to let these times, like you don't have to sign up for a time every single week. You can sign up for a time thinking that, like, okay, I'm going to sign up and we're going to take a look at this. And you've had a crazy busy week and you didn't have time to work on it, then just shoot me an email and say, hey, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. Or can we reschedule our meeting until next week? And I'm not totally fine with that. Like, I really want to give you time to work on these. Be diligent, actually get some work on it. I value my time, I value your time, so don't create a Zoom meeting with me if you haven't really worked on it and you don't really want me to give you your feedback. You know what I mean? All right. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next week with our personal Zoom meetings.